Welcome to my podcast, You Are More. I'm your host, Amy, and I thought it would just be interesting to kick off the month of December, a month that we are always looking for gifts, giving gifts to those we love. I thought I'd kick it off today with one of the greatest gifts in my life, my dad. And so I literally just called him today and said, hey, will you hop on a podcast with me? So he's here, and I'm excited to have him here. I'm excited to just kind of interview him today and just the different choices he's made. If you've listened to this podcast at all, you know I got started in real estate, and my dad basically was my accountability partner. He wanted to know what doors I was knocking on and how many people I talked to and all of that. Fast forward, he's been that multiple times for many people in our family. He's the biggest cheerleader of our family. He cheerleads my nephews, my nieces, myself, and he's the guy that drives around every morning. I can set my watch by it, praise over myself, my sister, and every morning. And so it's been an invaluable thing to me. And he stood with me through many times. But start to get this started, I mean, just to kind of give you a frame of reference, my dad every morning would tell us, he'd walk in and tell us, I have two sisters, there's three of us girls, and he would come in and tell us every morning before we leave for school, this is before we went to college, you know, how great we were. He loved us, we were proud of him, we could do anything that we wanted to do with our life. And it was the first thing that I missed when I got to college, is that I realized, wow, that's not everybody's experience. Oh, I missed that. And that was so not typical. But it's been if you look at my sisters and I, all of us are strong. All of us are determined, strong women. And I think that it's because we were raised by a dad that spoke into us, believed in us. And so I want to put him on here because it's not how he grew up. And if you're a parent right now, and you're the parent of daughters, and if you're a father listening to this, um, he's got some good advice and some good counsel. So, Dad, I'm happy to have you here with me.
Sounds good. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So let's start off. I mean, you started to come in and speak over us, but that wasn't what your dad did. Did you ever? I mean, how was this ever modeled, or how did it ever come to you?
It never was modeled in our house. I mean, my dad, sometimes I wouldn't see him for 3, 4 weeks at a crack. And he worked long hours, and then he did a lot of extracurricular activities till 2 in the morning. And so consequently, us kids would never see him. He never really encouraged us in anything. And literally, I mean, going on beyond college was not even an option in our household. Nobody talked about it. And I've often said at West High, they had two classes of students there, those that were going to college and those of us who were going to a party on Friday night. And so, I mean, further education wasn't even thought of. And Barb and I started dating really young, got married really young, and we used to walk and whatever we did, wherever we take a walk, we always said we were going to change. We were not going to live like our parents, and we were literally going to live a different lifestyle. And we pretty much just, before we even knew the Lord, we were calling things into our life. And anyway, so
That's a good point. You were calling things into your life. You've always been really positive with your speech.
and so I
He's never
always
had a bad day.
a great day. I always say you have what you say and you say what you have. So I think speaking things into your life are huge. And anyway, so just an example of that. I remember Barb and I once again weren't saved at the time, and we went on a walk, and we ended up on Sunset Road in Waterloo, and we were living on West Third Street, right, not too far from the inner city, in a house that was built in 1896, an old nursing home that we bought and remodeled. But anyway, we went on a long walk, and we happened to walk up in the 500 block of Sunset Road. And both Barb and I agreed at the time, you know what, we're going to live in one of these two houses. We looked at two houses, 554 and the one next door that Lemke's ended up buying. But anyway, so we determined, we somehow, some way, we're going to do it. And for those of you in the real estate business, we had looked a lot of houses, couldn't find anything, and our realtor at the time called us and said, "Hey, I just looked at this house, 554 Sunset Road." I was working at John Deere in the foundry at the time, and she said, "You need to look at it today because it's going to go on the market tomorrow." And so we looked at it, and at the so we looked at this house, and it was around 65,000. And anyway, she we made an offer that night. Made an offer that night or afternoon, and I remember I put $100 down payment because that's what I had in my checking account. Okay, and we had to come up with I think a $15,000 down payment. And we walked out of there, and Barb said, "What are you thinking signing a paper like that? Where are we going to come up with $15,000?" I said, "Barb, this is our house. We'll make it happen." And we, by hook or by crook, cashed in some life insurance, some other things, and we ended up moving into that house, 554 Sunset Road. And that's where Amy and Mo and Steph spent the majority of their childhood growing up. Eh,
Dad, hang tight for a minute. I'm grateful because here's the thing. This is how you've always operated. You're always been a faith guy. You've always been a guy that, hey, I might not have it, but I'm gonna step forward and do it. And it's always God's always had your back. Like there's always been provision. And you've always put your hand to the plow, done what you could do, but he's always shown up on your behalf.
Yeah, and I always tell, and my kids have heard this too. Uh, One of my statements I make, it's only money. You just got to go make some more.
Mhm.
And anyway, so yeah, we've been blessed, and Barb and I, like I said, we got married really young. At our wedding, I think there's 13 people there, and my family, the longest any of them gave us was 6 months for the marriage to stay together. And once again, we determined we burned the bridges behind us and never look back. And the term divorce, which most couples at some point in time might mention or think it, that term has never, or word has never been spoken in our house. And yeah, we've had good times, we've had bad times, but we were determined to keep moving
And
forward.
how many years you've been married?
52.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So going back to how you started to speak over Mo and I, like I don't know where that even came from.
Uh, I don't know. I think the Lord just put it on my heart one time that I wanted you guys to go out with confidence, because that wasn't something that I ever was raised with. My dad, he was pretty well AWOL, and my mom, she was just trying to keep the family together. And the reality of us three kids, I had a brother and a sister. We were kind of an afterthought. And I think probably given a different set of circumstances and times, my parents wouldn't have stayed together, but they did. And so anyway, and I have always been a reader, and I always say readers are leaders and leaders are learners. And I've always read a lot of books. One of my all-time favorites was The Magic of Thinking Big. And when you start reading that book, I've followed Zig Ziglar. I mean, I can go down the list of people. We went to a Bible believing church, Sunnyside Temple. Don Polston and Ruth Ann were the pastors. And if you walked out of there not believing and not realizing that you've got to speak into your situation, you were asleep at the wheel. So we had good mentors that helped us and helped myself. And Pastor Polson was one of them, and I could name off a few others too.
Yeah, you literally would come in every morning and literally prophesy over us and speak over us and make deposits into us. And so if you're a parent out there and you're thinking, wow, I've never even heard of this, I've never thought about it. Well, it's never too late to start, right? To start to prophesy and to speak over your kids' life. Tell them who they are. Tell them what they're about. Um, I look at my family, I look at my nieces and my nephews and even my own children. They're all very confident, but it's because my dad and mom and my dad like really did this every morning, but has always prophesied over us, always spoken over us, and even done that over my nieces and nephews. And so they really are confident in who they are. And confidence to me is, you know, my mom always says any outfit you'll look great in any outfit as long as you feel confident in it, right? If you put on an outfit that isn't great or that might be great, but you don't feel confident in it, it's not a good outfit. So she's always been any outfit worn with confidence is a great outfit. And so I would say that with anything, the key to so much success in life, the key to your ability to take a risk, your key to your ability to do anything is just having some confidence. And so that is a gift that you've given to our family, and it's not what was poured into you, but you poured it into us. And it's the dividends of that are widespread, and the ripple effect of that continues on, just of pouring confidence into somebody, you know?
Yeah.
and celebrating, and even when we didn't feel great, just telling us we were great, right?
In our house, if you were sick, I'd always ask them, "How do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10?" And if it was less than a 12, it didn't fly. And so, maybe it's strange, but we kids didn't have the luxury of telling me they felt bad. And I'm
Okay,
that.
that might have been a little strange, but it's okay.
And I'm that way. I'm that way with, how do I feel? Hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm about a 12. And I think that every day you get up and you can put your feet on the ground and go out and do whatever you do is a blessing. You need to appreciate that. Tomorrow I always say, tomorrow's not a given to anybody. I can get hit by a Mack truck today. The dog barks, the caravan moves on, and the next day somebody's wondering who's going to do my job. So you have to seize every day, every day. I'm not a big believer in bucket lists, because another thing I say is one of these days become none of these days. I don't ever. There's nothing in life that I'm like, boy, when I retire, I'm going to do this. So if you have the ability, the option, I suggest you do it today because tomorrow is not a given.
That's true. Boy, we've seen that is definitely not true. That is
Yeah.
definitely true.
Hmm.
I would say this, Dad, even from the family that you grew up in, family probably wasn't a priority to your parents.
Not hardly.
And
No.
family has been your biggest priority.
Well, the fact that all three of our girls were able to go to college, there again, Barb and I, because we'd made a determination when we were just kids, basically, that we were going to live a different life and our family was going to have a different life than we had. Going to college or not going to college, which that's not the end all to everything. But we felt it was important because either Barb or I went to college. Although Barb did go, I think she took a year of a college at UNI. But anyway, so not going on to college or further education wasn't even like an option because we so wanted our girls to be educated, and by the grace of God we were able to get it done without a bunch of student debt, and so it's all worked out well.
Here's the thing, I had no idea because this is another thing that my parents did. They never talked to us like let's kind of put this in perspective. My mom and dad were like 16 and 17 years old when I came to this earth, right?
Yep.
They were kids raising kids. And so let's fast forward. So we're 18 years old. They're early 30s and my sister is only 18 months younger than I am. They're early 30s, putting me through private college and my sister through you and I. And here's the thing, my sisters and I never knew my mom and dad had struggle. Like everything that we did, we all have strong, strong work ethic. We did Tom Thumb Donuts, we cleaned the stadium. And for some reason, it never dawned on me that we needed the money. It never dawned on me that this was out of necessity and not out of like, hey, this is fun because they always made it fun. And when I grew up, when my sisters, we would all tell you that we never knew that there was any struggle there at all because they didn't make us aware of it. And so I think so much it's been a good like because I think that you can put a spirit of lack on your kids and it can get dropped down really deep when you keep saying we can't afford to, we can't afford to, we can't afford to, where you could just script it differently and say like, okay, if our kids are out at Target and they're wanting toys and everything else, it's not that we say, hey, we can't afford to do that. It's like, hey, we're just going to think on that, we're going to make different choices. Like reframing your words so much to your children so they don't get that poverty spirit deep on the inside of them is so key, because if that drops on the inside of them, it's so hard to get that out of them. So we never heard that. I mean, my mom and dad, kids raising kids, had so much wisdom that they imputed into us and they didn't even know it. The fact that we didn't talk about lack, we didn't talk about that, but we worked all the time. So I should have probably figured that out. Like we worked more than most kids did. That's what we did as a family, but they always tied fun to it at the end. And so we just didn't know it was ever a real thing. And I didn't know until I got in the real estate business right after college. Well, about 6 months after college. And I started working with all these people and they had all this student loan debt. And I'm like, whoa, you guys, boy, they really set us up to have a really good beginning. They really set us up in a really good place. And I had no idea the sacrifice. Just think about this, guys. 30-year-olds, 31, 32, 33-year-olds having two kids in college. Um, and hustling nonstop. And so it was such a gift, but as a kid, you don't really realize it until you get out, you get out a little bit. But when I did realize it, I'm like, wow, something was in they never ever spoke lack over us. They never spoke lack in our home. We had no idea that finances were tight. We just never knew it. Yet we worked all the time and we just had fun. It was a great gift you gave us.
You're welcome. The thing is as I grew up, that's what I grew up in hearing. We can't do this, we can't do that. And I remember my mom paid all the bills. My dad was clueless. And so my mom would pay all the bills, and you'd hear her complaining while she's paying the bills. And, we never had enough. And, frankly, in the neighborhood I grew up in, which is a middle class neighborhood in Waterloo, I didn't know anybody but one family that took vacations, and they did that because both their parents worked. One's kid was his mom was a nurse, and his dad worked at Deere, and they'd take these big vacations. And big vacation for us was to go down to Pine Lake once a summer, maybe, and over a weekend a lot of times. And my dad would, my a station wagon, they'd sleep in the car, and us kids would sleep in a tent that didn't even on the grass because it didn't even have a floor in it. But anyway, so I grew up with that. I never, and so consequently, when Barb and I were young newlyweds, there again, we determined to do different with our life. And our girls, we never, there's never anything that we ever talked to them about saying, hey, boy, we can't do it because, we just can't afford it. We would figure out one way or the other or whatever. And, make it happen. I mean, when the kids started driving, we needed to get Amy a car, and I had a little sports car, an MG, and it's real simple. You sell the sports car to buy a car, so Amy's got a car to drive. Well, that's the reason why we sold the sports car to buy the car. But anyway, so our kids never grew up with the that poverty mentality,
And
and
that is, I can't tell you what a huge gift that is and what a huge advantage that is in life to not have that drop down on the inside of your world, because it determines how you see and perceive everything.
exactly, exactly. And it's just, but we just did not do that. We just did not do that. Yeah, there were times that were tough. I mean, okay, we'll go back to the house we bought at 554 Sunset Road. Our dream house. We loved it. Our first payment came due. I was working in Deere at the foundry, and I mean, it took every penny we had to get in the door. And I remember I was making our first house payment, and after getting chastised by the realtor for Columbus High we bought it from, let me know I better not be late on my payments. Well, anyway, I'm paying our bills out, and Barb's downstairs drinking coffee with one of her friends, and I'm upstairs going, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. You just bought this house. You came into it with almost nothing. Your first house payment's due and you're $100 short. What are you going to do?" And I mean, I had zero savings. And anyway, so I went downstairs to get the mail, and I'll never forget. I grabbed our mail, and there was a check from State Farm Insurance. We'd made an overpayment on our household insurance, and there was a check for, like, I don't know, maybe $250. I'm going, praise God, we got our house payment and groceries this week, so life was good.
I think it's so interesting because it's so easy to sit on the sidelines and not take risk. It's so easy to play it safe. But here's the reality of it. Faith grows and God moves. He moves outside of our comfort zones. I've never found God to really move inside my comfort zones because I could handle that on my own. It's outside. It's pushing the limits. It's when your back's against the wall, that's when the God of the 11th hour, the God that parts the Red Sea, the God that makes a way in the wilderness shows up, and he delights to do it. He delights to do it. And your life is a living testament of that. I feel like I'm an entrepreneur, and I've taken the calculated risks that I've taken, because you took risks and you are always an entrepreneur. And it's so that's why it's so critical, even as parents, guys, that you expose your children. You might not have been exposed to it, but that you expose them is when they're exposed to something. Once the mind is expanded, it's hard to really have it contract. Once you see something, it's hard to unsee it, right? But tell me this, what was it in you? You weren't raised, they didn't put any confidence in you when you were a kid. You were working in the foundry, and all of a sudden you decided you're going to launch a business. Where did that kind of internal, like, where did that come from? Where did the confidence to move forward come from?
I can tell you, to be honest with you, the I would have to say that once we after mom and I became Christians and got plugged into a believing church, and it happened to be Sunnyside at the time. Pastor Polson spoke into our lives, and Bernie McKinley, the former mayor, and those people spoke into our lives and really kind of opened us up. I've got good friends of mine, a guy named Ken Snyder from Alexandria, Minnesota, that really encouraged me that, hey, there's a bigger world out there, Scott. And I knew that. I knew that. I was making good money at John Deere, and it was a good job. And I some of the best people I've ever known were factory guys that I worked with, and we had a lot of people would call it a crappy job, but it was really fun. We had a lot of fun at work. And
Guys,
anyway,
he was shoveling sand all day. So let's talk about his attitude. Anyway, I don't want to digress.
so anyway, so that what happened is I started being around people that are thinking upward all the time. And anyway, so I knew I didn't want to stay at Deere, but what I did is I ended up getting an apprenticeship as a pipe fitter. And I was going through that, took a 60% pay cut with a growing family. And so it was tight. And there again, the kids didn't know it. But anyway, I was about a month away from graduating from the apprenticeship program. And I'd had been a journeyman pipe fitter, which is a skilled trade. And they killed the entire program. And anyway, so I was got sent back to a job, and I was shoveling paint out of the paint pits in Department 51 at Deere. And I'd shovel this paint up on second shift, hotter than heck. And I'd put this lumped up paint in plastic lines, 55-gallon drums. And I'd put a hazardous waste sticker on the drum and then band it onto pallets and take it out to a storage area. And I was thinking to myself, this probably can't be good for you. Okay, since you're dealing with hazardous waste. And so I really thought, you know what, I'm getting out of here one way or the other. And anyway, so my buddy Kenny Snyder had worked for Edward D. Jones, and he we were talking. He said, Scott, you ought to go up there and apply. You could tear it up. And so I went to the Edward D. Jones office in Cedar Falls, and got an application, filled the application out. Their minimum standards, you had to have a college degree. Well, I had a high school degree, and so I filled it out anyway, and I got a nice no thanks letter, which I kind of expected would happen. And I was talking to Kenny about it. He said, Scott, they owe you it. They should at least give you a verbal interview. And so I was working third shift at that time in the foundry, and I got a call from their personnel office in St. Louis, and did a little telephone interview. And I came downstairs. I said to Barb, I said, you know what? I just knocked that out of the ballpark. I'm thinking we're going to get an offer. Well, sure enough, they got a hold of us and took us down to St. Louis to the Edward G. Jones office. And I remember I had a blue pinstripe power suit with a red tie. And I was sitting there, Mom and I were sitting there, and the lobby as all these three or four other couples were sitting there, and everybody's dressed the same way. And they were talking about where they got their MBAs at and doctorate degrees. And I'm thinking to myself, man, you barely got out of high school. What are you doing here? Well, anyway, needless to say, did the interview. They spent like 2.5 hours with me. And at the time, I thought, I can't believe they're spending this much time with somebody they're probably not going to hire.
Yeah.
And anyway, and they spent time with mom, and finally we got back and we're leaving, and Barb said, you got the job, Scott. I said, what do you mean? She goes, those other guys and gals that were in there beforehand, they were in and out in 25 minutes. I'm like, dang. So anyway, I got this job to be a stockbroker for Edward D. Jones, and they wanted us to move to open up an office in Prairie du Chien. And at the time, the economy was tough in Waterloo, and we had a bunch of rental properties at the time. But more importantly, we'd gotten plugged into a church, and we loved the church. And our girls were actively involved in the Vineyard Youth Group, and Mom and I prayed about it, and finally said, you know what, we cannot uproot our kids from what is really good. And so we made the decision to tender my resignation. And I remember I was studying for my Series 7 license on third shift in the locker room at Deere. And the guys would come up there and go, I can't believe you're wasting your time on that. You'll never leave this place. And I thought, if you only knew, if you only knew. But anyway, so we decided to sever that relationship. Got a nice letter from them that said, "Hey, thanks, appreciate it, understand. If you ever decide to get in the securities business, we'd like to talk to you," which was a nice yeah, ego booster. And anyway, so that was kind of my first kind of thing. Like, you know what, there is a better thing out there, and I knew it. And but a lot of it was the people that I was surrounding myself with and listening to and being mentored just by their conversation. So anyway, that's kind of how it all went.
Here's just kind of a quick synopsis. Like, literally, can you hear in the story all the commitment and the decision that was made? So the decision was made. I always say a mental decision, mental assent to do something, it fades quickly. When you make an emotional decision, right? The heart or the mind decides, the heart justifies. The mind makes a decision, the heart justifies. So here's the reality. The key to everything was that as and he made an emotional decision. He made a commitment that he was going to live a different life, that he was going to get out of John Deere. And then he made a commitment. And then he followed through with his commitment and he compromised or he sacrificed. He didn't compromise. He sacrificed and sacrificed and sacrificed. And he walked out of John Deere after about, what, 2 or 3 years. He started a company. And after 2 or 3 years,
Yeah, about 2.5 years, 2.5, 3 years.
2.5 and 3 years. Now, this is what he'd do. He'd work third shift all night long. And then during the day, he would work on his business. Guys, that's commitment. I'm in the real estate business. We go to work every day unemployed, right?
Yeah,
Every day we get the opportunity to go earn the right to go to work for somebody every single day. He did that every single day for 2.5 years. He and my mom had a commitment. When you make a commitment to do something and you really commit, everything starts to move in your favor. Everything starts to, it's like a law. It's like a law of gravity. You make the commitment, you make the decision. It's like a God law, and you start to walk in that and you make the commitment to do it. Like those good things and those doors of opportunity and that stuff starts to open because you're committed. And so if you're out there today and you're kind of wandering around and you're thinking, man, I'd like to do this, I'd like to do that, get a decided heart, make a decision that I'm going to have a different life. I'm going to walk forward in a different season. 2023 is going to look different from me. It's going to require different disciplines, but I know that discipline, I mean, everything I want is on the other side of discipline. Everything you wanted was on the other side of
yeah.
discipline.
Well, the other thing too that really my biggest cheerleader's always been my wife Barb, and I worked at Deere not quite 14 years, and at that time John Deere Waterloo was a factory town, and to quit a job at John Deere you need your head examined. And one thing I will honestly say, Barb always encouraged me. She was always in my behind me. She never ever said, "Oh, you can't do this. You can't do this," or "We should rethink." I mean, she's probably always been my biggest cheerleader and encourager. And so therefore, when I quit Deere, you got to understand, we were less than 6 months away from sending our first child to college, Amy, and so that's a huge commitment. And Barb was like, "So, you know what, Scott? I think we should do it." And anyway, the obviously the rest is history.
See, again, it took a risk.
Yeah.
You went out and trusted. You went
Mhm.
out and trusted that God was going to meet the need
Yep.
and that you're going to do your part and he'd do his part,
Yeah. And
right?
he has.
He has. And so, as we just wrap this up today, what's one parting thing that you would say?
Uh, you don't have to end where you started out.
That's right.
Don't. Yeah, and the thing is you don't want to hang on to those old ways. I mean, you've got to keep your mind open. You've got to surround it with good thoughts. And obviously the Lord's a huge part of it. But I mean, you've got to just because where you're at today doesn't mean where you're going to be at a year from now, 5 years, 10 years from now, if you decide to dig in and move forward.
Guys, that is good counsel, good advice. And always remember this: you are more. You're created for more, you're meant for more. You are more. Thanks for joining us.